All right. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm calling this special meeting of the Public Safety Communications Task Force to order. It is 3:26 on September 6, 2023, and I'm Barbara Neal. As a reminder, the meeting's being recorded and the recording will be posted to the task force webpage following the meeting. Let's start with a roll call of task force members. The commissioner is here. Paul White, good afternoon. Jim Mack, good afternoon. Nod, okay. Michael Wright.
I am here.
Good afternoon, Michael. That gives us a quorum. Are there any other task force members on the line that I'm not seeing? Okay. Hearing nothing. I'll note that Kelly Audet is also here for our administrative support as usual. I see we do have some members of the public in attendance. So I will go around the room, and if you would like to introduce yourself and your affiliation, if you care to do so, you may do that. So let's start with, I'm going to use your first name because I can't pronounce the last, Derek.
Good afternoon. I'm Derek Gutrek with Alta Iris, together with a couple of my colleagues that will go around the room later on.
Okay. Thank you. Jim Morgan.
Yes, this is Jim Morgan with Alteris Technology Partners.
Okay, welcome. Thank you. Philip Sisk.
Good afternoon. Phil Sisk with Mission Critical Partners.
Welcome, Philip. Richard Townend.
Hi, Richard Townend with Alteris Technology Partners.
Good afternoon. And Mandy, we spoke briefly before we started, but go ahead and introduce yourself.
I am Mandy Wooster. I work for the Department of Public Safety doing policy development.
Excellent. Welcome, Mandy. And I see that Mayor Dunges has joined us. Good afternoon.
Hello.
We just finished the roll call and introduction of the members of the public. I'm sorry, Stephen Whitaker, I think you were on the line as well. Did you care to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I was going to say Steve Whitaker, Trouble Technology Partners, but that would have been funny.
Welcome, Stephen.
And there's
okay.
a phone number that a phone number that ends in 7000. Is that Jim? Is that a trunk line? Is that a Jim Mack trunk line? No, he's on Teams.
I think that's from St. J. Mr. Wright.
Mr. Wright,
Oh,
gotcha. 10-4.
okay.
All right.
Okay, great. Approval of the agenda. Do task force members have any changes to the agenda? Hearing nothing, I will move to the next agenda item, which is discussion of vendor questions and responses. I believe this item should be moved to executive session as we will be discussing information related to the little RFP that may impact contract negotiations. So I would entertain a motion that the task force finds that premature general knowledge of this discussion would place the task force at a substantial disadvantage. Is there such a motion?
So moved.
Yes, and I will second the motion with a I'm trying to be mindful of time for the people who have joined this meeting. Because we don't know how long it will take to go address these questions.
Mm-hmm.
I suspect I should have said, let's move the agenda around and put executive session last, because I feel like that's unfair to people to just sit here waiting to know how long it's going to take to come out of executive session. So
Okay.
I would ask my co-chair if we could return to the question about the agenda before
Let's do that.
Before we
'Cause-
vote on what has been moved and seconded.
Well, actually, I hadn't moved that yet. I was just putting it out there, asking for
Okay.
a motion. So we
Okay.
can, I think, let's go back and then we'll come back to this particular item. So on approval of the agenda, sounds like we have
You
a
wait a minute.
request to
You did have
move.
a motion and a second on that motion to go into executive session, and I was waiting to comment on why you shouldn't do that. But you can't
Okay.
you have to table or withdraw the motion and the second that are already on the table first.
All right, I
I
will
can
withdraw my
withdraw my
second.
motion.
Jim, yes. Everybody who made the motion withdraw, say they withdraw it. I withdraw the second.
Jim, you said you withdraw the motion. I didn't even hear you make it, so.
Someone made
I
it.
think it,
I didn't make
I
it.
think, I think it was Mike.
It was, and I withdraw. So,
Okay,
Very good.
okay. Excellent. So we are moving back to approval of the agenda. The commissioner has a recommendation that we move public comment up on the agenda before we move into executive session, correct?
I would move that executive session be the last thing on the agenda. I don't have the agenda open in front of me. I only have one screen. So I just want to make sure that we don't leave people hanging around. So executive session, in my estimation, should be the last item on the agenda.
Okay, I would just comment that we will have to come out of executive session and we may want to have a vote on what we decided on there, which would end up
Very
being the
good.
last item.
Right.
Okay.
But for to hear from other people for substantive stuff,
Mhm.
last item of substance. And for
Okay,
the record,
that's-
Ron Kumitz is here now.
Excellent.
Madam Co-Chair,
Yes.
I don't have a strong feeling about the order of the agenda, but I will say that when the vote that we were about to take comes up, unless you convince me otherwise, I will be voting against going into executive session. I think that the RFP is a public document. I think the questions and the answers are all going to be posted on the website as soon as we vote on them. And unless there are other questions that have been posed so far that I haven't seen, I don't think there's anything proprietary there. We're just
Okay.
answering questions, but
Let's get to that in just a minute, Paul. So let's deal with the approval of the agenda and the moving around of the agenda. And then before I jumped right into that motion, and so we'll have a bit of discussion
Okay.
on the going into executive session. And I'll let you know what my concerns are anyway. So we have a motion that the executive session be moved to the end of the agenda, with the caveat that we may have a vote in public session after that. Is there a second to that motion?
I'll second that.
Jim Mack, thank you. All in favor of adjusting the agenda, say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye. Okay.
Aye.
Excellent. So the agenda has been adjusted, and that means we will move to public comment now. Or do you want to go to, I guess we would go to public comment now. So anyone from the public who would like to offer comment, please let me know. Raise your hand.
Or
If you are
speak,
able.
Steve Whitaker.
Or speak, yes.
You can't
Okay.
see my hand is raised.
Stephen, you're up.
Yeah. I'm aghast at both the lack of knowledge of how to run a meeting, as well as even considering going into executive session for a discussion around the questions and the answers. And I have made a request, it was never discussed, that if you do go into any more executive sessions, and make a separate recording of them so that there's a review, there's a record of the meeting of what went on, so a judge could review it. Because I'm not going to continue to let you, there was no reason for executive session in the prior RFP, and y'all violated the law and did it anyway. And this is just reckless secrecy and reckless meeting management, and you need to stop it. So, you know, there is public questions posed. There are public answers to be just developed today, presumably, unless there's a need for further expert consultancy on framing the answers. But all of that, there's nothing that would give a disadvantage to the state there. So I just think you're stretching the law and you're skirting it or violating it, and you shouldn't be doing that. You're undermining the integrity of this whole process by doing so.
Thank you for your comment, Stephen. Is there anybody else from the public who would like to comment? Okay, hearing none, let's move on to discussion of vendor questions and responses. And we can start with, Paul's already expressed some concern about moving into executive session. We heard the same or similar concerns from a member of the public. I will tee this conversation up by saying that the commissioner and I did consult with legal counsel, both from the Department of Public Safety and from the 911 board, when we were discussing whether or not moving to executive session is appropriate when we're discussing the vendor questions and responses. And while it is true that those questions and the ultimate responses that the task force approves will be public, the discussion around the task force's around the content of the RFP that will be required to approve those responses could put us at a disadvantage and could impact contract negotiations. And so we recognize that ultimately the questions and the responses will be public, and that all vendors will receive those responses at the same time. If we were to hold this conversation in a public session, there is the potential that some vendors will have the information in advance of the official release of the responses. So that is, I guess I would say that I am deferring to our legal counsel's input. Commissioner, go ahead.
I would just echo most of what you said, that we consulted with attorneys from both sides that said that it is unusual to publicly discuss the contents of an RFP while the RFP is open for bidding. Public discussions of the contents could disrupt the RFP process itself by injecting comments or statements outside of the RFP that could influence the bidding process. They did say that to enter executive session briefly to review and approve answers, but do not engage in broad policy discussions during that executive session. Keep it short, essentially approving the answers. And that again reiterated that entering executive session is appropriate under these circumstances. General discussion of the substance of the RFP while it is open for bid could disadvantage the state or another bidding party by injecting comments or information outside of the RFP process into the bidding considerations. Doing this while an RFP is open for bid could taint the overall RFP process. That is all I have to say.
Yeah, and I appreciate that you brought that up, because that was kind of a thorough review of all of the information we considered on this subject. So, Paul, do you want to add or comment further?
No, I guess I don't have anything further. If both sets of attorneys are in agreement that that's the right thing to do, I'm certainly not going to argue with them. But I would suggest we keep our discussions in executive session to the bare minimum.
Yeah, agreed. Michael Wright, do you have any input, any comment on this?
If that's the guidance legal is giving us, I think that's what we got to go with.
Okay.
This isn't your legal. This is the commissioner of the co-parents legal.
Excuse me, Stephen. Please excuse me. I'd like to know if there are any additional comments from task force members or concerns.
Hello?
Yes, Ron, go ahead.
Yep. Barb, I'll concede that perhaps the answers should be, vetted and finally approved so that we can discuss the wording or something like that. But in the grand scheme of things, we have to admit that our history of large communications purchases is not the best, and the discussions that could potentially benefit from any input from possible vendors and the public, because we've made some serious blunders in the past, and I, for one, would like to hear what anybody has to say about this before we move forward.
I'm not sure who the we is in that comment, and I'm not sure which blunders you're referring to. and I'm clear that it's probably outside the scope of this RFP, which we have received clear guidance from two separate attorneys saying that it is not unusual to go into executive session for the narrow purpose of approving wording to respond to the questions and to release all the questions at the same time. I don't think we can remedy past wrongs of the state as a global entity by risking screwing up an RFP on a process that we're trying to run in a squared away manner.
I can see that, but what I was trying to say is that we could avoid, we collecting as much information as we can, and though possibly keeping it very close to the vest is in our own best interest. So, doing the minimal amount behind closed doors and inviting input is in our own best interest. And maybe we'll not end up with another $13 million system that we don't need.
So again, or I'll echo what the commissioner just said. I'm not sure what blunder or $13 million project you're referencing. It's been my experience with the procurement process for 911 systems to ensure the integrity of the procurement process. And I see moving this particular topic into executive session as doing just that. It places, in my view, the whole process in a unstable situation to have this kind of conversation outside of executive session.
Just to reference, the $13 million system that I was talking about was the VCOM Lifeline. But all I'm saying is that I think that the more conversations that are open and invite other input are better than less. And as the lawyers have said, the absolute minimum should be done behind closed doors. That's my conclusion on that.
Okay, and I don't disagree with that. I don't disagree with that. So, anything else from task force members?
Madam Chair, I'll move that we go into executive session for the narrow purpose of approving responses to the questions received from potential bidders to the Little RFP for project management support for this task force.
I will second that.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Do we have a vote? Let's vote. All in
How about
favor?
discussion? How about discussion?
I'm sorry,
on that?
discussion. You're right. Correct. Discussion. Is there any
What I heard is
discussion?
two different. Yeah, I have some.
Stephen,
you're not part of the
I'm
task
going to
force.
ask you to stop interrupting the task force. Okay, I understand that we're having some clunkiness with how the meeting is going as far as the rules of order and such. We'll work through that, and I'm happy to take input from task force members if I'm missing a step. But I will ask you to stop interrupting the meeting.
No,
So having said that, Stephen,
a point of order on executive session. The public can speak to object to executive session. You need to get over that and learn the rules. But this is
perhaps
you've just heard two different things. You've heard that you're going to approve the answers. You haven't developed the answers yet. You haven't even heard the questions. So you're going to basically rubber stamp what some ghostly body has approved for you. You know that, and I'm aghast that you're screwing this up so badly.
Paul, I'm going to put you on the spot since you are very familiar with how these meetings should go. We have a motion, we have a second. I've asked for discussion. Are we in order?
Prior to the motion to go into executive session, we should have had a motion to find that premature general public knowledge would place the task force at a disadvantage.
Okay, so where do we go from here?
For that, whoever made the motion to go into executive session should withdraw take up the other
Okay.
we'll take up the other motion. There is discussion on that. And then when we ultimately have a motion to go into executive session, there is no discussion on that.
Okay,
I am
So-
happy to withdraw my motion. I believe that my remarks were clear at the beginning, although not contained as part of the motion. That I believe that general discussion of the substance of the RFP, while it is open for bid, could disadvantage the state. And therefore, we should discuss the response to the RFP questions in executive session.
that is a motion. Do we
Yes,
have a
ma'am.
second?
That is a
Do we
motion.
have a second?
I will second that.
Thank you, Jim Mack. Any discussion here, Paul?
Yes,
Okay.
not for me,
Any-
not for me, but it is allowed.
Any discussion from task force members? Hearing none, I will call for a vote on the motion that is on the floor. All in favor, say aye or raise a hand.
Aye.
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 All right. So that motion has passed. Is there a motion to now move into executive session for the purpose of discussing the vendor questions and potential responses on the little RFP?
So moved.
Second.
Mike, you made the motion, is that right?
Yes.
Good, I'll second it.
Okay.
Thank you.
No discussion here, Paul, correct?
Correct.
Okay. All in favor of moving to executive session for the reasons stated in the motion, say aye or raise a hand.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Okay.
I think Barb is frozen, so I'm going to, at this point.
I got a point, Jen, I got a point of order. These votes have to be by roll call because they weren't unanimous. And the second vote has to be retaken by roll call as well if it's not going to be unanimous. But you know how I feel.
It very clearly, sir. Okay, so,
I think Barb's already in the other meeting. the
yeah,
executive
I
session
understand
meeting.
that. I understand that. We would need to adjourn from this meeting to go to executive session and then come back, so. I'm not clear, Steve, I don't know the answer to your question about whether it needs to be done by roll call. So I'm not sure
Paul
exactly where to
does.
go from there.
Anything that's not unanimous in a virtual forum has to be done by roll call. And so you do not have a valid executive session right now. And it would violate the law to go behind closed doors and kick people out.
I don't,
But you're violating the law anyway. But you also didn't discuss
Steve,
whether to record this.
This is
executive session.
not helpful, Steve. I'm willing to
Make sure you
understand.
record the executive session. Make sure you record the executive session.
Okay, we have no plans to record executive session, sir. We are willing to hear input when it makes us proceed in a smoother, better way in compliance with the law. You could keep your remarks there, it would be helpful, but the continual trashing and threats is not going to help us run a better meeting. So please, some meeting decorum would be appreciated. At this point, task force members, we had a motion, we had a vote. If it was not unanimous, that was not clear to me. I did not hear anyone say they opposed it or abstained. So I believe we should move to the executive session link, and we will return to this link when we conclude our business. Thank you.
The chair didn't ask for negative votes.
I will be stopping the recording.